The Sine Institute of Policy and Politics is American University's incubator for policy innovation. We convene leaders in the academic, public, private, nonprofit, and journalism sectors to engage and promote common ground and nonpartisan solutions. In an evolving world, we seize the opportunity to work on the nation's most pressing challenges through collaboration by experts and top scholars in their field with students in research and scholarship. As part of that goal, the Sine Institute leverages American University's location in our nation's capital, the nexus of government and a growing international business center. We connect diverse perspectives from around the country and around the world with our world-class academics and research, experienced practitioners, and the most politically active student body in the U.S. We stand apart through our focus on the role of business and the nonprofit community in public policy, the rise of the importance of economic regions in the United States, and international policy issues. Our focus is to make an immediate impact at the intersection of policy and politics that leads to real and lasting change. Thank you for joining us as we convene, communicate, and collaborate. Reimagining America, sports and entertainment in a COVID world with your moderator, Julie Andreeff Jensen, American University alum and SVP External Engagement and Communications, the Washington football team.
Hello, everyone. Really glad to be here with you all today and excited to introduce you to this fantastic panel that we have for our conversation. Welcome to the Science Summer Seminar Series. That's a bunch of S's in a row. I like the alliteration. Imagining America, Sports and Entertainment in the COVID World. I'm Julie Andreeff Jensen, and I'm with the Washington football team, and I'm thrilled to be your moderator today. I'm an alum of American University and the Washington College of Law, so this feels a bit like a homecoming for me with lots of friends on the call today and people that I've worked with over the years in many different ways. Our co-sponsors for the event, the Sine Institute of Politics and Policy, led by Executive Director Amy Dacey, and Matt Winkler, the Sports and Analytics and Management Program at American University, which he helped launch and lead. Today, we're joined by our expert panel and a group of friends that I am really excited to introduce you all to. And we will have a conversation wide-ranging around entertainment and sports in the COVID world. And then we'll take some questions from you all. And then we'll wrap it up at about 1 o'clock. I first want to introduce Monica Dixon. Monica and I had the chance to work together many years ago. So it's great to see Monica again. Monica is the Chief Administrative Officer and President of External Affairs at Monumental Sports, which is a big job that she has, and can't wait to talk more with her about it. And also the chair of the Monumental Sports Foundation, which does tremendous work. Monica has had a long career in politics and policy work before this. And we, back in the day, worked for Governor Mark Warner, which feels like a million years ago. But Monica has done just tremendous work. And one of the favorite things that I read about Monica was Politico named her one of the most experienced independent operatives in Washington, which says a lot in this town. So Monica, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Julie.
Nicole Hawkins, I would like to welcome to the panel. Nicole and I have just recently started working together in her role as the CCO at the Washington Spirit, and really excited to welcome you, Nicole. I know you've been around Washington for a while as well, and you launched your own firm, Nicole Hawkins Communications, many years ago, where you've been advising nonprofits, companies, sports, on how to have an impact in society and have sports really doing good work out there in the community. So we're really excited to talk with you about that. And the one thing that jumped out from your bio was that you made history as the first African-American woman to be named public relations director for an NBA franchise with the Washington Wizards, which I think is pretty fantastic, and really excited to talk more with you. So thanks for being here, Nicole.
Thank you. I can't wait.
And last but not least, this is a treat to have Derek Dockery on with us. For many reasons. One is because you're outnumbered with the women on the panel today, which is a treat for sports, Derek. But also, not only are you in a public sector capacity helping run government affairs for TikTok here in Washington, but I also get to say you are one of our proud alums from the Washington football team, having played in the NFL for 10 years, including with some other teams that we are big fans of as well, but I have to say I'm biased to Washington at the moment. So I'm really glad to have you here. Thank you for being able to participate with us. and looking forward to your perspective on having been an NFL player and going through COVID, as well as the business side and the public sector side, and how you've been seeing things change and what this is going to mean. So thank you all for being here. Let's get into it. So first question, I just want to open it up for all of you. And Monica, I'll start with you. What have we learned about sports during the global pandemic? We've now been a little over a year and a half from the beginning of when this all started last March, and a lot's changed. So I want to think about it in the sense of the role through the pandemic, kind of this transition we're in, and then the future. So starting with early on in the pandemic, what do you think we've learned about the role of sports?
You know, it's such a great question, Julie, because when I think back to how we all began the COVID pandemic, it was really, was centered for us on a basketball game where the Utah Jazz and the Thunder were playing, and they canceled the game because they'd received COVID tests right up to the start of the game. And I remember I was sitting in this conference room with our COVID task force that night, trying to plan out what we thought would be coming our way. And that night changed everything. And when I think back on it, it was professional sports that went offline first in the pandemic. And then we were the last to come online when we were finally allowed to invite fans back into the building. So in some ways for me, not just because I'm living it, working at a sports organization, but because for so many Americans, I think that's when it hit home that life was going to change. When an NBA basketball team stopped playing and there was no broadcast of sports for so long. So for me, it signaled just the change that we were all going to be facing in our world, obviously, but then for every American. And then, when sports finally came back online, at least for televised audiences, and we had that great Michael Jordan documentary that sort of took all of our time sitting in front of TV as entertainment finally coming back online, I think it signaled an important start of being able to enjoy things again in the sports and entertainment world.
Yeah, that's a great perspective. It was almost a level of reality check for everyone that this was happening. Nicole, how did you all experience that in the role of sports during the pandemic? I know each one of us has kind of different seasons, so we've all gone through it in different ways.
Yeah, so March 2020, our team was in Florida for training camp. So our team had left just 3 days before, and leading up to it, we're just, what do we do? Do we go? Do we not go? Do we, it was just, there's so much uncertainty, right? So we ended up going to Florida for training camp, and then the resort shut down. We were the only people at the resort. So then, halfway through, we're like, we can't do this anymore. So it was, everybody just so much uncertainty. What do we do? How do we do this? Nobody knowing what's going on. So everybody came back, and then, things just got shut down. It was really, really challenging mentally for our players, for our staff, just with all the uncertainty and not knowing what was happening and what was going on. Monica mentioned their medical task force. We also had an amazing medical task force from the beginning, and our medical task force is still to this day, with the new variants of COVID, giving us regular updates about things that we can do, things that we can't do. But last year, during the early parts of COVID, we just stopped. And that was really challenging for the athletes, right? They're used to playing, they're used to practicing, training, seeing each other every day, and that just stopped. One thing that I'm super proud of is we were one of the first leagues to get back into play. So we played a Challenge Cup in the bubble, and it was, hard because it was a month, but there were no positive COVID tests in the bubble. People were tested all the time. So having sports come back, at least
Sounds great.
Was I
Sorry,
great?
Nicole, we lost you there for 1 minute towards the end. So you froze a little bit. I was just telling the audience, sometimes we're going to have some IT glitches and we'll keep moving and keep going. So
Yes.
appreciate that. I know I've had the same issue today as well. So if I freeze, someone better take over for me. Monica, you'll be in charge. Derek, you were not playing at the time. You've now been in your role at TikTok for several years, but wondering your perspective on the role that sports was playing during the pandemic. And maybe you could also talk a little bit about what it must be like to be a player at the height of their career and know that things were shutting down and many sports were put on hold. Looking now at the Olympics with it happening finally and being pushed back a year, I thought a lot about those Olympians that were preparing, but you have a unique perspective having been a professional athlete. Would love to hear you talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So one, Julie, thank you for inviting me to be on this panel. I love being outnumbered. I'm outnumbered in my own family. So I'm glad to be on this panel with some extraordinary women. My wife and 2 daughters are extraordinary in their own ways as well. I have 2 daughters who are athletes who play travel soccer at a high level. And so thank you. I would say sports during the pandemic, I think showed to reveal a lot of things in us individually. I think it revealed in us the character that we have, the resiliency, our toughness. I think sports revealed the importance of community, of coming together. I think it's known that sports is the great unifier and how it brings people and societies together. And particularly last year, as I look back and reflect upon the year in the past, I think sports is a harbinger of things to come, right? Sports, the cancellation of sports announced that the world had changed and we hope for the better. But when I look at sports and what it did, I think it showed that, it helped the mental health and well-being of society. There are studies that show sports not only at a professional level, a collegiate level, particularly at the youth level, helps to combat anxiety and depression. I think that sports also showed that there are more than one ways to get things done, right? A lot of us had to adapt and adjust to new normals. And particularly when we talk about athletes having to participate in today's game right now with all the different protocols and procedures in place, it's something that we're learning to adjust to. And for athletes, I think it was a big psychological adjustment, right? When you think about having to participate in front of 0 fans in stadiums where you go from participating in front of 80 to 100,000, now you're participating in front of 0. And so I think athletes are like, okay, now I have to find other ways to motivate myself, because a lot of times athletes thrive on the energy within stadiums. And you look at our Olympics right now. And so we have to find other ways to motivate ourselves. And so I think really in total, sports have shown us how powerful sports is and how we can really take so much from sports in its totality, whether it be mental, physical, or even as a community. And so I've been very fortunate and blessed to have a 10-year career that gave me some indispensable skills that allowed me to transition also into a different career. So sports, I think, will continue just to pave the way in a myriad of areas.
I think that's a great perspective. And there's themes that all 3 of you have brought up around this nimbleness of sports to adjust very quickly. I think all of us had to figure that out on the fly. I know I was not with the Washington football team when COVID began, but I know they were the first NFL team to pull people off the travel schedule. Scouts were brought in and we shut everything down as we were trying to get smart and work with medical experts. You all have mentioned community and sports being a real unifier, which is one of the common threads that I hear people talk about, and the joy they get from watching sports that felt like it was taken away from them for a little while when we really needed joy more than anything. So maybe we could transition a little bit into this period of time we're in right now, which I do think is a transition period. Monica, you've been in a really unique position because you've gone through a couple different seasons between the NHL having no fans, and then the NBA, and then creeping into it for the finals, and then the NBA kind of slow rolling back into having fans. And now we obviously saw the NBA finals with jam-packed audiences inside and outside. How did you all think about approaching that in the season from the medical experts, the advice, the safety, giving our fans confidence in coming back? How did you all approach that and talk about that as a leadership team, knowing that entertainment and joy is kind of the value that we're trying to deliver?
Exactly. And I just want to echo Derek's comments too. It was so challenging for our athletes. I mean, as a person who sits in the corporate office, I'm thinking about financials. I'm thinking about what you just identified, which is how do we create a safe environment, or as safe as possible environment for our fans and our players. And I will just say that we had a tough time because we had several governing bodies. We had the NBA, the NHL, we had the DC city, our government body. And so we had to work with all three to fashion hosting the games in a way that met everyone's rules. And we're lucky that the leagues were as professional and amazing and had such access to smart medical staff that they did, because they sent us, I think it was about 144-page protocol document that we used to set up the building so we could bring players in and have games without fans. That protocol was very similar for the NHL. And then when the city started to allow us to have some fans, we had to follow the protocols around that. So it was social distancing, it was masks, it was down to the level of how many concession stands we could have open on the concourses and how far apart they would be. So it was extremely difficult. And it was tough because we were in a reduced staff situation at that point. Just after 6 months, 9 months, a year without fans in the building, we had to make changes on the corporate level as well. So it was a very trying time. It was very difficult. And I can tell you that the staff here and our athletes are thrilled that we will be able to start our seasons this fall normal, full capacity for fans, and normal protocols for our players. So we're really looking forward to having that energy and enthusiasm back in our building.
We feel the same way. We're excited. Training camp kicks off tomorrow in Richmond. Some stuff today, but practice tomorrow. And we're really excited to have fans back to be able to see that. Nicole, would love to get your perspective on kind of building off what Monica said with the Washington spirit and your experience just overall with clients. Do you think sports was a true leader in thinking about how to handle the pandemic, because we were in the middle of seasons and having to adjust in front of live audiences? Do you think we were the guinea pig? How do you think about that?
So I personally think that we were leaders all the way around, right? Getting the right people in the rooms to make the decisions, I think was very, very important. I think that, kind of piggybacking off of what Monica said, we did the same thing, right? We had to deal with the league office. You have to deal with DC United because we play our games at Audi Field and also at Segra Field in Leesburg, which is also owned by DC United. I think that we did everything that we needed to do in order for everybody to be safe. I think that, other organizations should look to sports as kind of look at what they did. They were successful. They kept most people safe. So I definitely think that sports all around was definitely a leader in this space, not knowing anything, right? Just having to figure it out as we go. So yeah, I'm again super proud of our league and what they did. from the start. So I mentioned the Challenge Cup in my first answer. Right before the Challenge Cup, there were a number of players for the Orlando Pride that tested positive, players and staff. So they couldn't go to the Challenge Cup. So that caused a lot of anxiety among people, like, should we be doing this? Should we not be doing this? And I think that everyone's issues and fears were alleviated because of the protocols that were put into place. So we still have, we started our season with no fans and kind of transitioned into partial fans, and now we can have full capacity at both venues. So we're doing a lot of communicating to our fans about what we're doing. We also have still socially distant sections in case people are not comfortable. We still have a lot of hand sanitizers. Monica mentioned, concession stands. We're really taking every precaution to make sure that people feel safe and comfortable coming in. But it is a lot of communicating internally within the organization, but also externally to our fans so they feel comfortable and confident that we're, taking care of them and their best, we have their best interests at heart as they're transitioning out of lockdown.
Yeah, I think communications has been heightened during all of this, right? Mm-hmm. With our own individual teams internally, with our players and with our fans. I've noticed the same thing. I also think we've coordinated a lot as sports leagues and teams learning from each other. I've asked a lot of questions. How are you guys doing this? What's the best way to do it? Is there someone else we should be working with? Which I think maybe is a silver lining coming out of all of this down the road. Nicole, I want to come back to you on one other piece on this around kind of the role of sports franchises in the local community in times of adversity. So you do a lot of impact work. We all are very involved in our communities with our foundations and our team foundations. How do you think about the role of a sports team at time of adversity? Where is that right balance of sports to be able to play a role?
Yeah, definitely. So we thought a lot about that last year. And how do we make an impact in our communities that need us the most? So when COVID first hit and we knew we weren't going to be able to do much, and we do a lot of community outreach work, we reached out to our community groups that we work with and said, how can we help you? What can we do for you? So, you have your pillars and the things that you want to do as an organization, right? But last year we knew we had to pivot that because some of the things that we were doing might not have been as valuable. So we had individual regular conversations with all of our community groups to figure out what can we do to help support you. And I've mentioned our owner, Steve Baldwin, before. He is amazing, really, really an amazing person. So, some of our community groups needed donations because they were smaller organizations, right? So we did, made some donations. Some of them needed products. So it was really just meeting our community groups where they were. It was challenging again because we couldn't do anything in person. So we did a lot. I'm sure everybody did a lot of virtual events, just appearances with our different kids in the community that we worked with. But it was, how can we motivate, uplift, and inspire people during what is arguably going to be the most challenging time of their lives, and support them in any way that they need? So it was really, really interesting, to be honest. Again, I'm glad that we're now transitioning back where we will be able to do things and events and support our organizations in person. We also last year did a lot of drives and things like that for organizations that we hadn't worked with before. So what was also nice was we were able to be introduced to new organizations that we can potentially support going forward. We also, all of our sponsors stayed on board with us last year as well, which is pretty amazing. So we partnered with a couple of our sponsors as well to do drives for different organizations as well. So I feel like that was a really good piece and a positive piece about it, because as much as we want to do good things, we are very lucky to have amazing sponsors that want to do good things as well and partner with us. So it was definitely interesting, but we did try to meet people where they were to help them in, their most challenging time.
Yeah, I think that was a common theme throughout, and getting back to some of the fundamentals
Yep.
that were needed.
Right.
Derek, thinking about this from the private sector point of view, um, how did you advise your company? How did you all think about the role that the private sector could play during this time, and even working with sports and athletes, influencers? You have a lot of influencers on TikTok. I can attest, having worked with a couple of them recently on some fun dance moves. But how did you all think about that? And how do you think the role of the athletes during difficult times changes? It seems like there's certain ones that really became role models through this. And I'm wondering kind of your perspective wearing both of those hats from the private sector and from being, still being an athlete. I'll say you're not a former athlete. You're still an athlete.
Well, thank you. My kids tell me otherwise, but thank you. So let me take the first part of your question. I think when it pertains to business and industry in general, I think that the landscape, as far as landscape of engagement when it comes to engaging a fan, is ever changing, right? Julie, you deal with this. Monica, Nicole, I'm sure you guys deal with this all the time on how do we engage our fans, particularly when models are changing constantly. I know from our perspective, being a technology company, social media company, entertainment company, we always try to find creative ways to partner with. I mean, we partner with all of the sports leagues. I'm sure if many of you were watching the Euros, were plastered all over the place, and the platform is burgeoning, it's growing. And so I think identifying creative ways to engage fans where they are, right? Because a lot of times, I mean, with the pandemic, things have changed. Some people might not want to come into a stadium. So how do we address those fans? When fans do come in, how do you address those fans? But from TikTok's perspective, just aligning with people that fit our brand. Our brand is about inspiring creativity and bringing joy. Typically, when you come to our platform, it's dancing, it's people having fun, being their authentic and genuine self. And so we try to align with companies, brands, individuals that fit our brand. I'm sure other companies and businesses will do the same. And then secondly, when it comes to an athlete's role and responsibility to the community, I think Monica and Nicole hit the nail on the head when they talk. For me personally, I think that organizations and teams are the cornerstone of communities, right? And fans, communities look to these organizations, teams, whether it be through nonprofits, players using their own foundations to help support, amplify, augment the great work that's happening in the community. And I think COVID really highlighted and amplified that point, right? Because athletes and organizations played a critical role. You think about each player association, the Players Coalition in the NFL, what they did revolving around criminal justice, whether it be education, homelessness. I think that athletes play a critical role in helping to support initiatives that, give people a chance. I mean, we have an awesome, unique platform, right, where we bring a lot of eyeballs and attention, but also companies, brands are willing to partner with athletes. So I think athletes need to take that responsibility and role seriously and use it for the good.
I think that's a really great point. Monica, Derek said something that made me think about kind of the surprises that came out of what we've gone through over the last year and a half, particularly with sports and entertainment. Do you think that the disruption allowed for a level of creativity that maybe we weren't, while we were adjusting and trying to make these day-to-day decisions on how to keep our players and our teams safe and our fans safe, also a level of creativity that we had to, this didn't exist before this format. We've probably got people all over the country that are dialing in that couldn't be in the room right now if we were doing this otherwise. How did you guys think about that at Monumental? You have such a big umbrella of businesses and brands, and I know you launched your William Hill Sportsbook during this time. So that's what kind of made me think about the creativity aspect, even though it was probably in the works for quite a while.
Right. There was definitely innovation and upside. And sorry, my light keeps going off because we're conserving energy when we're not moving. So apologize, we'll get that back on. There's a little example and then a big example I can think of this. And a little example is that we have a coach's avail after our games down in our media room. And it gives the media who are covering the game the opportunity to ask a few questions about what happened and kind of get a raw emotional response from the coach and sometimes a couple players. And what we did because of COVID and because we didn't have media that were within players, social distancing, we did everything by Zoom. And so it allowed media that might not always get to participate a chance to do that. And it is something that might be easier going forward than going back to just physically always having to be in the same place. And it's a small example, but it provides better access for folks and more insight. And then as a big example, the one that you mentioned was that we were in the middle of leasing out space here at Cap One Arena to William Hill Sportsbook. And they had gone through the process of getting licensed, and they had real estate they were about to develop and open, and then COVID hit. And it shut down so much of the construction. And so we had to delay when we would be opening. And what we decided to do instead was open up our box office, which was closed, obviously, because no one's in the building, and use those windows as an opportunity for people who wanted to bet on sports to be able to come down to the arena, stay 6 feet apart in line, and place a bet. And so that gave us an opportunity to introduce that way to be more involved with sports, even though people couldn't come into the games. So I do think there'll be a lot that changes, that it advanced digital engagement with our employees and the ability to have meetings when everyone's not in the same place. And I think those things will stay around. But I know a lot of folks are anxious to get back in person because we lose so much when we're not in the same room with one another. So we're looking forward to that.
Yeah, there's pluses and minuses to it for sure.
Yeah.
And I think the innovation sometimes is forced by the disruption, and sometimes it speeds up our plans to think about these things. I know, Nicole, you all have been really engaging in a new ownership model. I'm thinking about it from the business perspective, and some new owners have come in. It's really interesting as we think ahead and kind of the future of the role of sports going forward and coming out of, hopefully we come out of this pandemic soon. We're watching closely on the Delta variant to make sure we're all being responsible and continuing to engage with our fans and communicate as much as possible. But we're excited to have people back. Thinking about the role that women's sports is playing going forward. I'm thinking about the things that have changed that are going to be different forever going forward. And you and Monica are in a unique perspective here. And Nicole, you have some female investors with the Washington Spirit. Would love for you to just talk about how you've seen the role of women's sports change. I know Matt Winkler was kind enough to give me some statistics around record ratings for women's sports this year, up over 20%, including new leagues and broader options for viewership. Marketers are looking at women's sports more than ever before, but we obviously know the dollars are very different compared to men's sports and where they are. Compensation levels are not the same yet. All things that we continue to be advocating for as a group. How do you look at women's sports post-COVID and the opportunities that are out there?
Yeah, it's important to invest in women. It's been proven that, people watch women's sports. People are paying attention to women's sports. We, again, have a number of high-profile women investors that joined our club, which is amazing. We have a new majority owner, in addition to Steve, co-majority owners, Michelle Kang, a wonderful woman who knew nothing about soccer, but wanted to invest in women. And she is a spark plug and has been really, really amazing since she joined us. But interestingly enough, a lot of our sponsors we're the first team that they've sponsored. So, I think that that's amazing. And we have a lot of high profile national and local sponsors, but just that, I think it's important for people to understand that Investing in women is always a good bet. You mentioned the viewership. Last year, our Challenge Cup and our fall series had I don't know the exact numbers off the top of my head, but record number of people watching those series. Last year, we signed a deal with CBS Sports. So some of our games were on televised nationally. And again, this year, also Paramount Plus, we signed a deal with Amazon, Twitch. So a lot of our games are streamed on Twitch. We've been doing a lot of really cool stuff on Twitch. Last year, Monica was mentioning kind of some of the things that they did. We also are going to be doing the press conferences now forever virtually on Zoom, because again, especially for women's sports, opening it up to anybody in the world, any media person in the world to cover us just by clicking a link is, a no-brainer for us. So we're going to be doing that going forward as well. But we also opened up a lot to new audiences, whether that's sponsors or fans, because of the content and the original content we did on Twitch. So I think, our women are amazing. They are amazing on the field, but they are amazing personalities off the field. So investing in them is a safe bet, and it's only going to get bigger and brighter and bolder, I think, for women athletes across the board. So smart investment.
I love that theme. Monica, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I just totally agree. And I think for the WNBA, there's incredible interest in these women athletes. And I continue to see it grow since I started here just 5 years ago, and forecast even better ratings, sponsors, and engagement with fans. It's growing, and it's exciting and fun to watch.
Yeah, and it's really exciting right now with the Olympics. You see the female athletes are front and center, whether it's gymnastics, swimming, track, surfing. So it's really exciting to watch for sure.
And just tying in with that, Julie, real quick. So we have 4 players on our team that are playing in the Olympics right now. So 2 for the United States, 1 for Sweden, and 1 for Japan. Our team is also very international. But, coming off of the post-Olympics, there's always going to be a huge kind of buzz and a lot of excitement. So what we're hoping is that our Olympians come back. We can continue to communicate with our fans that it's a safe place to watch games, and that we can, knock our attendance out of the park and make a really good fan experience for the rest of the year.
Thank you for that reminder, and congrats to having the 4 women competing right now. It's pretty. I'm staying up too late watching it every night, so
painful.
I look more tired today. I want to just remind everyone that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'm going to ask one more question to Derek, and then go to some of the questions that are coming in the Q&A, and Amy Dacey's going to help filter some of those in. Derek, you were talking a little bit about the kind of fluid fans and fan engagement, and how you think about it using such an immense platform as TikTok. As we think about the new models of how sports is able to monetize their own content and using platforms like TikTok, how are you all thinking about that and working with sports and entertainment? In the past, the models have been through very traditional ways of communicating and pushing out content, whether that's working with media partners, which are always going to be incredibly important partners to us, regardless of the new ways of communicating and expressing our brands. But how are you seeing that innovation evolve and thinking about working with sports and content creation?
Excellent question, Julie. It's something that I know our company is thinking about. I'm not an expert in the subject matter, but I would say that just sort of when I'm looking at it from afar and just seeing our platform and the partnerships that it's really been able to garner over the past year, I think that, streaming is becoming a huge deal, right? And whether it's Twitch and other platforms of the like, our company is just looking for opportunities to really amplify our message of, creativity and bringing joy. I know that, recently, particularly at my perch, as far as on the public policy team, trying to find great ideas and issues that our community cares passionately about. And so if other streaming services and businesses alike care about certain things that we care about, we want to partner with them. Mm-hmm. So that's been really key to us, and it's something that we're really keen on. And I'm just excited to be tethered to this company because I think there's so many great things that we can do from our platform and on our platform.
Yeah, it's a more direct way of being able to deliver content, right? Because the teams are, I know, Monica, you all have your own production and content studios. Nicole, you guys, I know, are building out some of that capacity right now because that's what you've done in the past with some of your experience. But having those direct platforms to be able to go to, I think is incredibly important and empowering because then we're able to get our messages out faster and in fun ways. So we love being able to partner with you all and other platforms out there. Let me go to the Q&A now, and then I can always keep going because I have lots of questions that I have, but I want to make sure we get some from the audience. Have a question here from Lori. Did you communicate with other teams in the league or teams in other sports in the area come together for best practices? I can absolutely say yes, but Monica, maybe I'll kick this one over to you since you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. But you were one of my first people I called when I took the job in October. So if that's any indicator.
It is because we all talk with one another. And particularly in this market, the Washington Nationals have a great team. Julie and Jason have a great team. We've been able to work with Nicole and the Spirit on a number of community events as well. And I will say that on best practices in the last year and a half, we talked a lot about how we queue lines, how we create social distancing in a way that allows everyone to stand safely if they're outside the building. There are so many things like this that we talk about in normal times, but in COVID, it was especially important because we were all, as we've all said several times, we were making it up as we went. We were confronted with new situations where we had to create all new ways of getting people in and out of the building, getting our athletes in and out of the building, and traveling. And so we were lucky to have each other to share and compare notes.
Yeah, I agree. Nicole, anything you want to add to that?
No, I agree 100%. Just very grateful to have people to tap into as we were all trying to figure it out. Yeah,
I think one of the things that I've noticed is still being relatively new, 6 or 7 months into this job, there is a tight-knit community around sports here. And, maybe the pandemic has even helped solidify that further as all of us were kind of in this crisis mode of trying to figure it out and find unique ways to partner together. So, causes that matter to us, are there ways for us to show up for each other? I know one of the things we're all talking about is being able to go to each other's games and support that in a safe way and make sure we're there. So I think that's something that we'll be able to see more and more of as the seasons continue.
And Julie, if I can just jump in, one of the things that I should have mentioned, and we did this with the football team as well, is that our athletes were very focused on social justice during this time period because of the unique events of that happened while we were in this break. And voting became a primary objective for our basketball teams. And so we ended up opening up Capital One as a voting center. And this is something we work very closely with Jason and the football team on, as they were also using their facilities to help create space for people to not only learn about the issues during the election, but vote. And I think that was very powerful because our athletes use their own voices. Bradley Beal talked about how it was the first time he voted and why that happened. And I think it really helped engage the community in a way that maybe they wouldn't have to see these athletes talk about these experiences.
Yeah, it's a great point. That's the first time FedEx Field was opened up in that way to be used as a voting center. Have you guys used your arena before that? Yeah, so first time, which is another silver lining coming out of it. I can think that kind of goes to that creative, innovative thinking around it, is what role can we play that's different? We've got this space in a safe way. So I'm glad you brought that up. Derek, we have a question for you here. How has your experience on the field and understanding the player mindset helped in understanding what can be done off the field with fans, both loyal and new? I think for all of our teams, we know that growing the fan base is an important thing, but we also want to keep the loyal fans that are there. And, with our team, we've obviously been going through a lot of transition, a lot of change. We talk a lot with the alums about holding on to those traditions. So this question, I think, kind of blends a lot of your experience between being on the field and your player mindset. So I'll read the question again just to make sure I didn't totally confuse you there. How has your experience on the field and understanding the player mindset helped in understanding what can be done off the field with fans, both loyal and new?
Sure. Well, let me start off by just saying how proud I am of the profound impact that sports in general has had on our society as a whole over the past year. I mean, just to hear what the football team has done, the Wizards, the Spirit, and the rest of our national DC sports teams has done just to really engage their fan base and community on a myriad of issues really makes me proud. Because typically sports were just known as, hey, we're just here to entertain, right? And I think people are knowing that, athletes are more than just athletes. I think they're a microcosm of society as a whole and really play a huge part in our daily lives. But I think just the mindset I had as a player and how does that translate to supporting fans new and old? I think for me, when I look at it, one, it was more of I'm here to represent not only myself, my team, my family. I want to put on the best show as possible, performance as possible. And I know if I do that, that will translate to really entertaining our fans, making them really excited about, coming to watch Derek Dockery, an offensive lineman, be one of the best at what he does at his craft. And so for me, I just think about just the commitment and dedication and hard work. I think about just the resiliency, right? Being able to adapt and adjust. When I was talking about adapting and adjusting, players have to adapt and adjust on the fly in games, right? And so I think post-career, for me in particular, once I left the field, the ovation of crowds, I think about okay, what's next? How am I going to transition? Putting myself in an environment that allows me to grow, an environment that facilitates change. And so I think sports, there's so much to be learned from sports. That's why I'm glad my kids participate in sports. Even though I'm hey, if you guys choose to want to play sports at a high level when you're older, great. If not, great too, because I'm going to be here to support you. But I just think that having the right mindset and mentality at whatever you do, being able to identify strengths and weaknesses is important, taking a SWOT analysis of all things, right? And then applying those things that you've learned and gleaned from certain situations, I think will help in any arena, whether it's, new fans, old fans, whatever you're doing in life.
Great answer. I really appreciate that. Question here. This is an important one. Coming out of the pandemic, but not out of it yet, and not everyone has been vaccinated. I'm going to paraphrase this question because it's a little long. Not everyone's been vaccinated, including some of the athletes. Are teams and leagues planning on making it required? If so, are there repercussions for those that don't participate? This is obviously a very important question, very timely and very complicated. And each league has a bit of its own. I can do a little bit on where we are with the NFL, and then I'll hand it over to you all. You've got both the business and you've got the players, and there's a combination there. From the business side across the NFL, the vaccination rate for 2 vaccines is incredibly high. The areas where we've been able to host vaccine clinics, we're actually hosting one at Richmond this week. We know that everyone has to make individual choices, but we are encouraging vaccines across the board for everyone that's involved, not just our business, but also our players to make their choice and do what is best for them and their families. We've provided education, people to talk about the pros here and the best ways to handle it. We also know that, some of our fans are vaccinated and some of them are not. And we will be bringing fans back into the stadium in the fall and doing it in a way that is as safe as possible and encouraging people to do it in a very safe way for all of us to be able to enjoy sports and get the joy out of it and the entertainment out of it. So we will continue to promote education, to promote people having honest conversations, and doing everything we can to make sure that people are safe along the way. The leagues, at least from the NFL's perspective, I know there was big news this week coming out of the NFL on some of the rules that they're putting in place, whether it's fines for violations of COVID policies. The teams have very strict rules around tiering of the players and coaches and staff to make sure we keep people safe. So there'll be some pretty strict fines, as well as if games have to get rescheduled and can't, there'll be a forfeiture of games. So I think that they've tried to take a very proactive stance on this going into the fall to protect everyone involved and to encourage everyone to be safe and hopefully that we'll have a successful season. We were very lucky last season to be able to play all of our games and get through a good season. So Monica, anything that you would add to that from your perspective?
No, I think you hit it on the head. We, like you, provide lots of education with medical professionals. The leagues have been amazing with players as well, and they're getting access to great information. And as you said, they're doing what is best for them and their families, and that's the same with our employees as well. We have said that we expect our employees will be vaccinated and back to work in September in the office. We're excited about that, and our employees are excited about it. So we're looking forward to the fall when again everyone can be back in the office and hosting events in a safe and enjoyable way.
That's great. Nicole, anything from you as you guys have had these conversations amongst your players or your leadership?
It's really the same. I think we're, in the same boat across the board, right? Just educating everybody, providing resources, and trying to make things as safe and comfortable as possible. We too want full stands, after the Olympics, right? So, just again, continued education and information. That's really where we are. And as I mentioned, our, medical task force is still meeting regularly. We get an update once a week. So, things could change as far as kind of things being mandatory. But right now it's individual choice and us just doing the best that we can to communicate and provide information.
Yeah, I think the data has been very helpful to us to be able to get real-time data, both from a national perspective, from different markets. We know what our region is showing and what the data is showing us. So that between the medical experts that we work with and the data that I'm sure you all are getting as well, it helps us be able to make determinations on the safest and best things to do to get people back in the stands. So appreciate that question coming in from James. I have one final question, and then I'm going to introduce Matt Winkler to come on and talk a little bit about the program at American. The role that sports and entertainment can play in the financial recovery. What we haven't talked about is just there has been obvious economic challenges through the pandemic, and that's been across all industries. Some have been able to capitalize on it for various reasons, technology being in specific areas that have been able to be front and center, and some retail. But really for sports and entertainment, this has been challenging. We haven't been able to sell tickets the way we normally would. It's a different experience. How can sports and entertainment play a role in the financial recovery, economic recovery, particularly for the DMV, as I think about us going back to some level of normalcy in a safe way? Derek, maybe I'll start with you on that one, and then I'll go around all three of you and have you guys give me some thoughts.
Sure. If I could just comment briefly on your previous question. I think even like we're here for the Policy and Politics Spine Institute, I think this is an important discussion and dialogue for students, right? Particularly future leaders. Okay, yeah. Like we're talking about individual choice, right? I mean, private business, right? The choices that they have to make, and how does that play in part of our discussion? Do we encroach upon liberties? Do we mandate people having to have vaccine, particularly from a player perspective? I know there are certain players that are not willing to get vaccines or vaccinated. I've been vaccinated. My 12 and 13-year-old daughters have been vaccinated. So I think that's an important discussion that, you know, our leaders, in particular our students, need to think about. Like, how do we approach these sensitive topics? And then I would say just a role that sports can play in the financial recovery. I think it's doing it right now. I mean, when you look at, particularly, I would say this, I sit on the board of the Play Sports Coalition, essentially where we're trying to, you know, amplify youth sports and have access for everyone. I think youth sports is going to be critical, particularly in the travel industry. A lot of families are traveling now, helping travel industry. You think about the various clinics, camps that are taking place. And I think that a lot of people are trying to get back to a level of normalcy. And I think sports will provide that normalcy. And so I think that's the way we can help the recovery, financial recovery, just by being available, being outside, participating in sports. And I think that'll help speed up the recovery.
I appreciate that, and thank you for weighing in on the vaccine conversation. You're right; it is a really important one, and didn't want to totally put you on the spot there, but appreciate you weighing in on that. Monica, your thoughts on the economic recovery?
You know, as a convener and the community center that Derek talked about, the role of sports has, we have it also physically. Cap One Arena is right in the middle of downtown. We have a lot of small businesses around us that are not open anymore because the 3 million people that we would have in and out of our building in a year just weren't here. So we know that once our doors open, and they will in a couple of weeks for our first concert, and we have the Eagles coming for 2 concerts. I'm sure that the students have no idea who I'm talking about, but they were an important band for me. But they'll be here and we'll sell out. And that will allow the businesses around us to open and hopefully to bring some income and some people back to work. And I'll say real quickly, because I know we're running out of time, that Julie, you and I and Amy had the chance to work in politics, but we're now working in sports. And there's so much that we know from our work in politics that enables us to be great professionals in sports. And I will say this is exactly what the Sign Institute is all about, and what Amy and Matt are putting together is for you as students to be able to talk about these issues and apply them in any industry. We're not that far apart. We're focused on leaving it better than we found it, and a double bottom line. And so much of what you can do in your work is these core issues that you're learning as a part of this great program. So thank you for participating, and we want you to come intern and work for us when you're done.
Hear, hear. I agree. If someone had told me when I was at American that we would be having this conversation, if I was working for the Washington football team, I would have said you're crazy. So Nicole, any thoughts on the economic recovery and the role of sports and teams?
I was pretty much going to say exactly what Monica said, just opening up, having fans back. That trickles out to the neighborhood and the businesses and the restaurants, and, you know, supporting that, the recovery that way. That's what I think is going to be that have such a huge impact going forward, right? You know, I know I have a couple of friends that owned restaurants, and they had to close last year, right? One near National Stadium, actually. And it was simply because the majority of their business came from people attending baseball games, you know, so it's really, really challenging. So that's certainly going to be, I think, the biggest impact that sports has is once people feel comfortable, there are people in the stadiums, people in the seats, supporting those small businesses around. And then, you know, staffing as well, right? As Monica mentioned, how great is it going to be for the staff to be able to come back and to work and, you know, do what they love to do. And that's going to, I think, be the biggest and most important piece of the puzzle going forward for that recovery, for sure.
Yeah, it's all about jobs and getting all those jobs back in. Matt Winkler, Thank you for sponsoring us today and helping be a part of this with the Sign Institute. Will you talk a little bit about the great work that you're doing at American and the program, and any opportunities that you want to let people know about?
Sure. So thank you all for being on this and for us to sponsor co-sponsor this event with Amy and the Sign Institute, Monica, Julie, Derek, Nicole. This was a master class, literally. So any of my students that couldn't make it on, we look forward to forwarding it to them so they can see it. Yes, I now run a master's program in sports analytics and management. It's the first one of its kind, where it really talks about this third wave of the sports industry that we've sort of been ushered into. It's a lot about data-driven decision-making and technology. So it weaves into a lot of what we talked about, but it's a program that can be done in a year, and we've got a great group. We have 3 different enrollment stages during the year, and if you want more information, just reach out and look up at us. It was really a pleasure helping co-sponsor this, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Amy at Sign, Derek, Monica, Nicole. I know how crazy your lives are and how much work you have going on in the background. So I really appreciate you taking the time. For all the students who joined us today and others, thank you for being a part of it. Have a great week, and please follow us down in Richmond this week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.